Okay, back again. So as I said, using the brute force cracking is one of the way in order to guessing your password, and it also depends on the hashing algorithm actually in order to check the strength of your password. Now, what makes a bad password? Now, in general, human trying to find an easy way to remember the password. It's difficult to remember long strings and random numbers. So we're trying to use some of the easy words, some of the familiar words, numbers in order to create our password, right? Which will make our password really a very weak password. So one of you might say, right, okay, why not using capital letters, small letters, and also putting some numbers at the end or at the beginning, maybe using some of the special characters. You might think that this is going to make my password very strong. Actually, if you are using any of the password that give a meaning, which means that any password that has a meaning, such as schools, admin, for example, UK, any words, any text that give a meaning, or in other words, it can be exist in a dictionary, or can be created by using our native language. Actually, this is make our password very weak, because right now the hacker doesn't have to use or check all the dictionary, all the words in the dictionary one by one by himself or herself. There are a lot of tools that can be used in order to check all the words in the dictionary against your password in a second or in a minute. So basically going to be trying your password one by one, using all the words in the dictionary against your password. And even some of them might use the same way that you are thinking about combining maybe two dictionary words, having some capital letters at the beginning maybe or at the end, using some numbers, all of that actually can be cracked easily. So for example, in the password over there, which is called snowcows3, this is, in your opinion, it might be hard as it contains capital letters, small letters, can also contain some numbers. But actually, this could be hacked very easily. I mean, combining two dictionary words such as the snow and the cow, and capitalize the first letter, which is the S, and adding a number at the end as number 3, make by using any of the rules applied over there in the black picture or in the figure, it can be cracked very easily. Even if the password is 20 characters long, as long as it's going to be created from the word or from the dictionaries, it's going to be much quicker to crack even 10-digit completely random password. Okay, so always think about having a random password, random characters, random numbers within your password. So CPU against GPU hash cracking. So CPU, all of us know about the CPU, which is central processing unit, and the GPU, which is the graphical process unit. Now both of them can deal with or doing some process. Now one of you might say, all right, okay, why do we need to talk about GPU? Now GPU is not only about or it's not only about using the GPU for the graphical processing. It can also be used for mathematical calculation. So you can make use of the GPU in order to do some mathematical calculation. Now a CPU usually has 4 to 8 cores, and in general it is much faster than the GPU core, especially when we talked about the password hashing. Now the latest one may be the Core i9, which is basically containing or consisting of 10 or 12, 14 or 16 cores. Now, we've got as an example of that RTX 2080 Ti, which is basically containing or having a 352-bit memory interface and 11 gigabyte of 14 gigabit GDDR RAM memory. So basically you're talking about a very high processing and this can be used by anyone. Actually, it's available in the market, and anyone can buy this CPU. And basically, this CPU can do a lot of processing, such as the brute forcing, guessing, and trying to use as much as combination as it can in order to guess your password. So can you imagine? I mean, instead of taking 2 years, maybe in the example that I mentioned in the website, when you checked our password, how much is strong or not, it might take even like 2 hours by using such a CPU. So basically think about already on, you need also think about that. The hacker might have a very powerful CPU, very powerful computers, and this powerful computer can be used in order to hack your system. GPU is excellent at processing mathematical calculation as well. It's not all about the graphics. Graphic rendering is simply a series of complex mathematical calculations, so are hashing algorithms. So GPU can be used also for doing some of the mathematical calculation for hashing or for password hashing. A mitigating issue with the human psychological password generation. Let's give an example how we can make a good password compare or by using or related to the human psychological password generation. Now, if I asked you to generate, for example, 12-digit password containing some lowercase, uppercase numbers, how can we create a good password by using those combinations? Now, the best thing is to use something called a random password or random letters, numbers, without even knowing what they mean. Now, one of you might say, all right, okay, how I'm gonna remember those letters, numbers, if I have chosen them randomly? All right, so the best thing is to create your scenario or create a story in order to remember this password, such as in the example over there, Tom is getting fat because he ate 27 pies and drank 8 milkshakes. Right, now we can mimic a password or create our password or generate our password by using this story or this scenario easily. By, for example, maybe having the first letter from each word, as well as the numbers and the special characters, and using them as a password, as in the example over there. So TIGF, having the special character, then PHA 27, and so on. So in this way, you are having a very strong password. If I want to just copy this password just to check how strong is this password. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go Google how strong is my password. Then let's choose another website. Okay, we cannot use this one. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, let's try this one. 62 trillions year. Well, actually, I'm just, have a doubt about this number, but at least you've got a very strong password. All right, so it's not going to be easy for the hacker to crack this password. It might be cracked by at the end, but the thing is, it's going to take him or her long time in order to crack this password. Okay. Now we've got something called pass the hash. Now, usually Windows makes extensive use of hash as part of its authentication method, which means that when you enter the password, it's going to be hashed and stored within the system, right? And this is called pass the hash. And pass the hash, it's used to gain access to a specific server as that user. Now, some of the attacks might happen where the attacker can use the hash guessing instead of guessing the real password. I mean, why do I need to worry about the real password while I can just use the hash one directly? So as an example of that, now we've got something called NTLM hash. And NTLM, also known sometimes as NT hash, is a hashing protocol used by Windows system for authentication. So it hashes passwords and store them in a file, this file called SAM, as NTLM hash. So basically I've got a file called SAM, and inside this SAM file, we've got the NTLM hash, where it contains the fixed size of the hash related to the password being used by the users within the system. Right? So as an example of this NTLM hash, as the line over there, which we're gonna explain in a minute. Now, the first one, which is the username usually. So Jason, the username, 500 related or relative to identifier, and we've got in the red color, we've got something called LM hash, and the green color called NT hash. So basically, this is like a fixed hash used by Windows or by Windows system in order to authenticate users. So the hacker might make use of this to generate or to try to guess the password without even knowing the real password. I don't need to know the real password or the plain password as long as I can access the system or crack the system. Is that right? So it might be a way for the hacker in order to abuse the Windows authentication system by accessing the NTLM hash in the SAM file. So in order to overcome these issues, in Windows and specifically NTLM use something called the challenge response or CR authentication method in order to check that this is really the real user who is gonna access and use and access or checking that the password in the SAM file is the right one. Now this process is done as following. First, the client will receive a challenge from the server. Okay. The challenge, it might be like a random number or a random text, and the client needs to encrypt this random number or random data by using a secret key, right? And send that back to the server. Now the server gonna hash or encrypt the same data or the same random number by using the same secret key. And if they are identical, that means the user is really the ones who's trying or the real one or who's trying to access the server. Otherwise, that means that someone is trying to hack to the system and so on. So what kind of vulnerability we can get with pass the hash way? Now, as I said, pass the hash way is a technique that allows the attacker to authenticate a remote server or service using only the NTLM of the user password. So there is no mean to by the hacker, or the hacker doesn't need to know the real password or the plain text password. I only need to hack the NTLM hash password or hashed password in order to crack the system or enter the system. So if an attacker has a real or the user hash, they would not have to spend time and resources trying to brute force or guessing the hash password to reveal the user clear text password. So I don't need to know the clear text password. If I know the hash or trying to guess the hash one, that's fine. Right? In this case, I can enter the system or access the system easily. So we've got some tools which is called PS Execute or PSX, which is a tool as part of the Windows and allow the user to launch an interactive command prompt on a real system. It's a very serious issue actually, guys. Why is that? Because it can execute a process and redirect the output to the local system or to other system, and it can take advantage of PS execution features and functionalities. So basically, in general, PS execution, it's part of Windows, right? And this service allows the user to launch an interactive command prompt on a real remote system such as Telnet or SSH. So basically, you are trying to access a remote system by using a Telnet or SSH. So this is a tool which is being used by the users in order to launch this interactive command. Now, some of the hacker might make use of this by using, for example, the PS execute vulnerability in order to set up a backdoor or swapping process with a built-in system account in order to pass the hash or guessing the credential or trying to reach the SAM files in order to know the NTLM hashed. So you might worked with that before, which is called Metasploit, which is a framework that has a number of exploits to take advantage of, such as the pass and hash or pass the hash vulnerability. Metasploit is pre-installed in Kali Linux. You worked with that, I think, last time. And it can be accessed by using MSCOM or MSF console, right? So you worked with that. This is one of the tools or the framework that can be used in order to take advantages of the pass the hash vulnerability. Also, we've got something called remote file inclusion vulnerabilities, which is this in the same way. Remote file inclusion, it's like trying to track a web server into running a file that you host on your own server. So what's that mean? Let me show you a video to exactly showing you what's that mean. I have the link somewhere, just hold a second. Might be this link. Yeah, so let me just start that. I'm just gonna stop sharing and share that again as I need to play the sound, okay? So I'm gonna stop the sharing, then I'm gonna share back again, but this time I'm gonna include the computer sound within the sharing. Can you see my desktop, guys? Can you see my site?
Hello and welcome to Secure
I
Code
hope you can
Warrior.
hear the sound
In
as
this
well.
module, we'll be looking at remote file inclusion. We will explain what the vulnerability is, its causes and preventions, and some potential hazards. So, what is a remote file inclusion? Remote file inclusion is a vulnerability that allows files hosted on another server to be included and executed as if they were part of the application. What causes remote file inclusion? This vulnerability exploits the dynamic file include mechanism that exists in some programming frameworks. A remote file inclusion is possible when uncontrolled user input, such as form values or request headers, are used to generate file include commands. To understand the remote file inclusion vulnerability, let's look at an example. Let's say a vulnerable site uses the page parameter, which it includes to dynamically build the content of the site.
So, guys, this is the most important things. Now, this is the site location or the server, sorry, location. And normally you issue this request, http with site.com, and you also include some of the requests such as get request or post request within your request. Now, this is just a normal request, right? Now, what the attacker can do.
An attacker hosts a malicious script on the site. When included, the script will execute shell commands chosen by the attacker. The attacker exploits the page parameter.
Right. So the attacker is trying to create a command or malicious command, such as running a specific software, allowing access, and instead of having the get request, can you see the red color over there? Now this is the request. Now instead of having the get request or the post request, which is normally within the request going to the server, now the attacker is including a link to the malicious code, that's been applied. So basically, when the server
To include his
receives this
script into the
request,
code of the site. Since his script is part of the current page,
right, now when the server or the application server receives this request, now the normal case it should get having a get or post request, but the evil or the malicious code, the ones that being added to the request, gonna be inserted to the server. Now the server gonna think that this is like a request, and in the malicious code, the attacker might include some of the orders or executions, such as running a specific software or making the server connect to a specific site. All of that gonna make the hack or the application server hacked.
He is now able to run OS commands.
Can you see now? Instead of a normal request, now I've got the malicious code. Right. So this is just what do we mean by the remote file inclusion vulnerabilities, where the hacker is trying to insert some of the malicious code within the request going to the server. Right. So it can be used to open up a reserve shells, or it can be also bypass all the authentication, then password cracking. All of that can be done by writing the malicious shell or the malicious code and sending that to the server. This is just a simple figures. It's the same like in the video. If you look at the number one, basically the hacker sent just a normal request to the web server or to the target web server. Now, the hacker's web server sending a malicious code to the web server, the targeted web server. The targeted web server gonna run this malicious code, and in the malicious code might contain some of the instructions, such as open or encrypted session open to the hacker, open an encrypted session or shell or command to the hacker. Now the hacker can execute any commands within the web server. So this is called RFI, or remote file inclusion vulnerabilities. Let's talk about the last topic, which is data breach. Now, what do you mean by data breach, or how do data breach affect us? Now, data breach are really bad news for everyone, apart from the cyber criminal, of course. Now, if your data, your password, your financial information is being revealed, and hacked by someone, you're going to be in trouble. Not only the company that hacked, but you as well, especially if you are using the same details everywhere, same password, the same accounts, maybe the same usernames and password. So basically you're going to be in trouble, as your data going to be published, of course, and or sold. It can be sold to someone else to make use of that. So data breach are really bad news for everyone. If you set up an account with a website or a company who stores your details, such as your password, your details, your financial information, and this company has been hacked, that means your personal details can be released into the public domain. Once it's hit the public domain, it is almost impossible to contain. Now, at the very least, hackers may steal account emails, passwords, or password hash, but it gets much worse. It might be containing some of your financial information. So, how we can reduce the damage? The best way to reduce the effort or the effective of the data breach is to have completely different passwords for different accounts. Instead of having one password for all of your accounts, such as having your same password for your university account, your Google Drive account, for Gmail, instead of that, try to have different passwords for different accounts. Also, you need to ensure you are using multiple email in order to authenticate your accounts, not only using one email. So try to create, for example, 2 different email accounts within Google, or one within Google and one for Yahoo, from Yahoo, and use them, and one from Hotmail, for example, and so on. So try to create multiple emails in this case. Be careful who you set up account with, and give them as little information as possible, especially when you are dealing with companies that are not really famous. We're not talking about Amazon or eBay. We're talking about some company that might not be familiar. So basically, just make sure not to give a lot of information and details to those companies. At the very least, have a very complex password for email, and don't use it for anything else, because if you are breached, attackers will try or prioritize accessing your emails because they can wrest all of your password from account associated with it. So basically try to have different password for your email account against the ones that you are using with the company's account, for example. So this is all about the theoretical part for today. We talked about the password policies and data breach. Have you got any questions about that, guys? Any questions? Right. Okay. If there's no questions, we're gonna have a 10 minutes break, then coming back to talk about the practical part. If you've got any questions, you can type your question in the chat box, or you can just wait until I come back from the break. Thank you very much. I'll see you in 10 minutes. Go back again. So let's talk about the practical part, which is very simple for today. Now, basically, you have done the exploitation last week, where you have used two tools in order to do the exploitation. Now you need to basically write the result, or in other words, the result analysis and remediation reporting. You need to write the remediation reporting, the final remediation reporting, after you have identified the vulnerability and have you exploit the vulnerability. Now we need to do some analysis, result analysis and remediation reporting. So what do we mean by each one of them? Now let's start with the result analysis. After we finish from doing the vulnerability assessment and done the exploitation, now when we look at the result, we need to try to make them or make sense of them. So breaking them down into an easy and understandable chunk can be easily used to identify exactly where is the weakness lie within the system or the system you are trying to attack or to do the penetration testing on. So this is related to the result analysis, trying to divide them into chunk or blocks, trying to identify exactly where the weakness lie within that system. So how we can do the result analysis, or how we can perform the result analysis? We need to look at the result found, as I said, in the penetration testing, the ones that we have performed last week and the week before, where we done the vulnerability assessment. Try to work backwards with research to understand exactly what's the weakness that we have found in the system that we hacked for a particular vulnerabilities. Now you should focus on the three keys or the three key areas, including the specific first, the vulnerability that you have exploited. So this is the first key. Sensitive data that was accessed. This is the second one, and the amount of time you were able to remain in the system without being detected or undetected. So the three keys are really important, guys. Remember, so we have done the vulnerability assessment, we have done the penetration testing, and we have now trying to look at the results and analyzing them. We need to remember three keys. The vulnerability that we have exploited, this is the first one. Sensitive data that we have access to, and the amount of time that we have or we were be able to remain in the system without being detected. So these are the three keys that you need to mention in your report for the penetration testing. Now this is related to task one, which is basically very easy, the result analysis. Of course, you need to do that for your portfolio, the task that you have done last week. Okay, the penetration testing that you have done last week, you need to do the result analysis for that. Now, task two is writing the remediation reporting. So, as we have done the analysis, now we need to write a report. And this report should include a generic high-level description of how to handle those problems that we found in our penetration testing. Trying to catch all the remediation guidance often that we found and trying to write them in a report. Trying to give that report to the client in order to trying to fix the issues, the problems that we have found within his or her system. So if a client has a vulnerable services running on a web server that they depend on, as an example, the remediation should offer more than telling them to simply disable the services altogether. So let's assume that a client asks you to do a penetration testing for a web server that he has, and you found some problems. A solution for those problems, or the solutions for those problems, not only about disabling those services. You need to basically let the client know that for example, that there's a straightforward method of filtering or fixing the issues, such as filtering the SQL injections if you've got any SQL injections in the system, trying to give some advice to the client how to filter those SQL injections, how to configure their firewall properly, also how to fix some of the services that make their system vulnerable. So the remediation report actually, it's the recommendation that you tell to the client in order to fix the issues that you found, right? So try your best to have a good quality of report in order to give a lot of details for the IT department at that company or to the client in order to understand exactly the full problem, the full situation, and in this case, they can fix the issues more easily, right? So you need to have more details in your report about the vulnerabilities, about how to fix those vulnerabilities and what kind of services they need to, for example, add, disable, remove, and so on. So how we can perform the remediation reporting? We need to do the perform the remediation reporting for our scenarios, the ones that we have started 2 weeks ago within the scenarios that we've got in our assessment, right? So we need to understand exactly the vulnerabilities that we've got within the system and what kind of problems that we found within the system that we hacked and how we can fix those issues. Right? You might need just to look for a solution for such a problem. Do you have any question, guys, about the task for today? Now, these are some of the suggestions that you can find within the system that we have started or we did the penetration testing for last week, such as checking that all the software is up to date, checking if there is no SQL injections, doing some filters, XSS, error messages, server-side validation, form validation, passwords, any problem with the passwords or the policies, file upload, SSL, web security tools. These are some of the problems that you might need to look at the system that you're trying to check its vulnerabilities and try to check any solution for those issues. As I said, it's not only about telling the client or the users that you need to disable the services. Opposite to that, you need to give some suggestions, some solutions for the problems, trying to give some solution for the client in order to fix that issues. So this is about task 2. Now for task 3, which is related to your scenarios, to your assessment actually. When you finish the result analysis and writing the remediation, that's it. You have done and finished like 90% of your portfolio, and you need just to make sure that you've got all the points in your assessment, that you've got all the points required in your assessment over there. Maybe just a good idea also to look at those guidelines while you are writing your report, such as the spelling and the grammatical issues within your report. Don't forget to write your page number, table of content, references, and so on. The recommended number of words is about 1500, but as I said, I don't have any limits or minimum or maximum numbers for the words. You can just write the assessment and the number of words in your assessment as much as you can. And of course, I'm going to give you maybe next week an example of an assessment that you can follow in order to build your assessment or present your assessment in a right and nice way. So now what I need you to do for this of the rest of this session, You need to write sections about result analysis. What do you mean by the result analysis phase and the remediation reporting phase? Right? Explaining each one of them. You can just paraphrasing the same sentence up in this file, or just write down or type anything that you feel like it's more suitable for those two terms. You can look in Google for an explanation or definitions of those two terms, and write just a small paragraph about each one of them, or two sections about each one of them: the result analysis and the remediation reporting. Yes.
Tariq, like when we write answers for these explanations on these particular areas, we can look in a book that you've actually listed and get that with the reference.
Yeah,
Into
if you
the
use any book or any articles, you don't forget you need to write that in the reference.
Right. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, when you write about the result analysis phase and the remediation reporting phase, after that, you need to look back to the results that you found last week about the targeted system, the penetration testing that we have done, sorry, last week for our targeted system. Write all of the vulnerabilities that you found and how you have exploited them. And also you need to write a remediation report about how to fix those issues that you have found within the targeted system. Okay, so try to document all the possible remediation that you can find. Think about any measurements or any solution that you can put in place in order to fix those issues in the assessments or in the scenarios that you've got in the assessment. Any questions about the practical for today?
Tarek, in my case, because I couldn't run the software, can I actually get some screenshots so I can actually stereo myself and write?
Yeah,
Because the
and also
theory
you
is
can use some of the videos on YouTube. For
ah,
example,
okay. I know.
we mentioned that some of the things that you need to make sure about any system that has, like, for example, those things, right? So you might just need to look at 3 of them at least, such as SQL injections. Just looking in YouTube about the SQL injection and how to fix those issues. Look for password policies, how you can make a good and strong password policies, for example, how to use the SSL in a right and a proper way, how to fix an error messages, and so on. So you can just choose or pick up any 3 of those topics and
Yeah.
talk about
And
them.
then talk about
Yeah, and any solution, any suggested solutions in order to fix those issues.
Yeah, what I did also, I went through and I checked each and tools, like how it functions. So
Yeah,
I have seen they have put the results, it tells the administration password is weak. They put a list, like with the graphs and things. So I realized having that picture, so I should be able to know, right, what are the
yeah.
areas
If you
that
want,
needs.
you can postpone that to the next session, as we're gonna talk about a lot of tools. The next sessions about doing the penetration testing and hacking. Tools such as the infrastructure tools,
And
or other tools that we can use in order to hack a web application, for example. Some of those tools you have used before. Some of them we're going to introduce them to you. So basically, you can just wait until next session in order just to have a good idea about what kind of tools that you can use in order to do any penetration testing or any hacking for any system.
sure,
So this is
thank you.
for Thursday sessions. Or just have a look at the YouTube videos in order to try to find some of the solution for some of the general or common problems, such as SQL injections, password policies, and other issues. Any question, guys? Right, so I will leave you to work with your remediation report and your analysis. If you've got any question, please write that in the chat box or give me a shout and I will try to answer your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Tarek. Cheers.
Guys, if you have any question, you can just put your question in the chat box if you want.